Hello, and welcome to Rainbows and Razor Blades Productions, where chaos reigns in all of our content. Kat will be joining us shortly. She had some things to tend to, but for now, you get Chad and I, and we're pretty cool. Hey, Chad, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, it's me, Chad. You might recognize me from such shows as At the Threshold. And hang on, what show is this?
Chaos
Chaos
Curiosities
Curiosities? Chaos. Fuck, what's the name of the other show?
commentary.
Chaos Commentary? I just, I didn't write any of this down. I'm just going.
I mean, hey, go for it.
You can't. But yeah, uh, you may wonder why I'm dressed like this because I can dress however I want because I'm a grown ass adult.
And he's
Also, it's
got the
like,
good weather and not this
yeah,
bullshit that Kat and I
yeah,
have in
right.
Phoenix.
It's like 50 degrees right now.
It's cool here. It's only 79.
Oh, that's I think
It's supposed to be back above 100 in the next, like, 3 days, though.
that's like almost 20 degrees warmer than it was for our high today. I was at lunch and we were like, "Oh, it's so warm out at lunch. It's 62 degrees."
Anyways, hi, I'm Kristen, your neighborhood chaos goblin, and you can find me on lots of stuff on this channel, so tune in anytime we go live, and you'll probably see me. Anyway, tonight's discussion, we're going to talk character death in games. So I got to thinking about this when I had a conversation with a friend earlier this week, thanks to a big name show having some things happen and how we feel about character death in games and how there's some people that just are so adamantly against it for whatever reason, those that enjoy it and like the RP options that come up around it. uh, so I figured it would be something that would be good to talk about on the channel and get some differing opinions because in my case, I'm actually a fan of character death as something on the table. Note, as of yet, I have never had a character die in any of the games I'm playing in. So it's one of those things that maybe I'll feel differently when it actually happens. Who knows? But I think it's one of those things that brings up a lot of really good RP opportunities and it gives players the chance to uh kind of bring a little bit more drama into their character. How do you see it, Chad?
Oh, man. I've been thinking about this all day. Yeah, I'm kind of with you for the most part, right? Like I don't wanna say I'm an old school gamer, but I'm a fairly old school gamer, and, death was like a normal thing back in the day, right? And so, for me, like yeah, for me, it's like it's less of a problem. I I you know, I do like when, either as the DM or as a player when we're able to make it, like, mean something, have that kind of narrative weight as opposed to
Yeah.
be like, "Oh, I failed to save, I'm dead." 'Cause I've been there. I've been that guy. Like,
Right.
I've failed to finger a death roll in 2nd edition and just dead.
Yeah, I think that one of the main things that I enjoy about it, because I think there is one time in a home game that I had a character die, but it was with a bunch of people that were murder hobos and didn't really get into the RP. So it was like, oh, I'm dead. Looks like I gotta make a new character. And that's about all it
Mhm.
was. But I feel like, especially with how we're running our streamed games and all of that, with the high level of RP, it does give us the chance to give it meaning and let the players role play out their reactions and feelings to this teammate that's been with them passing, or, you know, give the player whose character it is a chance to send off that character,
Mhm.
as it were.
Yeah, it's definitely like a different thing, right? In this kind of public format, right? You have I don't want to say like a different level of like connection to a game and to everyone's characters. Um but like a low key different level, right? Like I feel like especially like our like the game I run and then a lot of the games that you run or are also on the channel, they're much more, like you said, RP heavy, a little more characterization. They're not your old school style, like hack and slash, dungeon delving. Like,
We're
if
just
you
here
know,
to
if you
roll
haven't,
some dice and kill some monsters.
right? Oh yeah, like if you haven't rolled up four characters by the time you're level 5, you're probably not trying hard enough. Which was definitely like kind of the feeling that it was back in the day. But yeah, in this, and then we got to think on some level. I gotta, as a DM, like on some level, I also have to think about it like, what's the viewers interaction, right? Like, oh, so and so's character, like, oh, your character died, it dies in the session. Like, how do the like I got to think about how you feel about it, how the other players feel. But then also because this is kind of in this format, it is a it is a kind of a product, right? So you also want the viewers to be, guess, on the level. Obviously, you're
Yeah,
not going to not everybody's going to be happy, but you want it to be at least, I don't know.
not something that's going to, like, for some people, uh, i.e. the person I had this long in-depth conversation that spurred all this, uh, they get pulled out of the narrative when there's character
Mhm.
death, and especially if it's, like, that's the character that you've been emotionally tied to for watching. Do you have a
Yeah.
reason to continue even watching at that point?
Right, yeah, if that's your real inroad into that game, into that show, like, can make it tough.
Like, the big show that just had the thing happen. The character I was most emotionally tied to is the one everything happened to, and I'm just like, "Do I even wanna continue watching this campaign?
Yeah.
I don't know."
Is it okay if we segue really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I have this thought, um, and I think this is all related, obviously. I think, there's thinking about like the level of interaction, as a viewer, of a stream game. And you can name any number of stream games, and some of them you watch and you're like, oh, this character is really cool, and these other characters in the game, I don't care as much about, or maybe some of them you like. But then some other games you watch and you're like, these characters are cool, the story's cool, but I also really like the people, like the players.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that I don't dislike the players in the aforementioned, as is yet named in this show
I'm
game.
trying to
but
not spoiler shit.
but yeah, but there's, like, if I think about like I think a safe thing like say Acquisitions Incorporated as a like the C team isn't on anymore and they wrapped, but like that game was great. I loved their characters for the most part, but they were just so fun to watch and it was like their interactions were super great and I feel like if one of their characters had been killed, it wouldn't have like for me anyway, right? Because of the level of interaction I have, say with that game, it wouldn't have taken me so far because I'm also here for the player.
Yeah.
Because unlike say like a TV show, like right, like Cal Droga or whatever dies. Jason Momoa's not on the show anymore. I don't know if
Though,
that
I
was
really
Jason
would love a
Momoa's
Dungeons& and
character.
Dragons movie where it's the same actors playing different characters.
I know. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
I'd watch the shit out of
But,
that.
but yeah, like this theoretically, like, you know, if your character died in, say, an At the Threshold of my game, I'm not gonna kick you out of the game, you know? Like, I
Well, and
wanna
that's
play
the
with you,
thing about the
you're gonna
games
play
is that, like, unless it's, this person is getting to a point where they have other obligations and they can't play or, some other thing, and they
yeah.
decide that they would like to send their character off with that kind of
Mhm.
character death. That's one of those times where well, and one of the points I was gonna make is before going into any game, before you even start the campaign, you should have laid down with your players how they feel about character death in the game. And
Mhm.
if there are people that are strongly against it, then yeah, maybe you don't make it so deadly or you give them more outs. Like you make sure that there's somebody nearby with a spell to come in for a save or a potion or a deity even. Like
Right.
so that it doesn't mess with the players so that they don't want to play at your table anymore. And if you do have like specific games, like I'm going to run 10 candles eventually. Even as just a one shot in December is the current plan and it's definitely one of those things where everybody in that game is going to die. That's just how it is. So you have to make sure you have people at the table that understand that they're going into it with their eyes open like okay, yes, this is something that I'm okay with cuz I've brought up that game with a couple of people and they're like, "Oh no, I couldn't play it because it would trigger something," or I'm not a fan of character death. That's just doesn't do
Mhm.
anything for me." So, it's a game they know that they shouldn't play.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely the sort of thing that, needs to be discussed in a session 0.
Yes. And hey,
Um,
every DM person running the game out there, safety tools in session 0 and laying boundaries must.
absolutely. Yeah, it's, death is such an interesting evolution in this in the hobby? In the hobby, right? Yeah, like, as a D&D player back in the day, like I said, you know, death was the table, right? It wasn't on the table, death was the table,
Right, right.
you know, and then as we progress into more story-based games, it's like, well, maybe it's doesn't need to be the entire table.
Right. Well, and when you go
Yeah.
into like if you're playing the game and one of the PCs does end up passing and you don't have an out, they're okay with it happening. You've also got to make sure that you're not making it feel like the player like make the you don't want to make the players feel like their characters are disposable in the story that like
Mhm.
oh just they're gone so now you can just slot another person in and it's just going to go on the same.
Right.
It's making sure that you give them a way to like the make it so that it again means something and so that
Yeah.
they're like this will drive a new storyline or it's something where uh the new player that comes in, whatever class they're playing isn't replacing their previous character. It's, possibly a different class,
Mhm.
if they decide they want to play the same class, then maybe the party goes searching out for that specific uh, class of somebody to fill the hole that they have, you know. And it's really easy if you're not careful to make it feel manipulative. Like there's sometimes where maybe I have it wasn't on any of the big name ones, but I watched a stream where the DM very obviously did not like one of the PCs. He liked the
Mm.
player, he, liked the story, but he just wasn't there for what the character brought to the table. And the character did end up dying, and it did feel manipulative and like they were targeted, and that it was one of those things where the DM can't be that all powerful. Like you need to make sure, if there's a problem you're having with how they're playing the character, deal with it. If it's not something you want at your table, you figure it out.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Just adding everybody. I just added everybody in the Discord
Oh.
'cause I'm a jerk. Yeah, I like yeah, giving narrative weight, right? Because it's so easy to just be murder hobos and then let that be reflected on your intra character interactions, right? So like your interpersonal stuff.
Yeah.
But then it's just cycles of shit reinforcing itself. And those games have their place, but can't we want more from our stories? Like
Exactly.
let's give some narrative way to, oh shit, so and so died. How do we process that? What do we do? How do we
Right?
move on?
Yeah, like, one of the notes I made for myself was give the remaining characters and the new PC of the player who's lost theirs chances to use it as an affirmation of life and not to dwell
Mm,
on the death, and give them reasons to continue in the story.
mhm.
Because especially if you get a group that, like, if they've intertwined backstories where it's, going back years or things like that, you've also gotta consider, "Oh, hey, these are, 2 characters, say, like Beetlebug and Scoria, that have that background. If one of them were to die, it would have ramifications on the other."
Right.
And that's something you've definitely gotta honor in the game and make sure that you're giving the players space to RP it and feel those things, and, that let their characters explore it and, actually bring something to the game other than, "Oh, this player wanted a new character, so bye."
Bye. Yeah, I've been there. I've done that. Is Michael
Aaron.
watching? Michael is not watching.
Oh, Michael.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's that part is hard, I tell you what. As a guy with personal experience to that, like, but here's the deal, Aaron didn't die. Still
Right.
alive,
Right,
right?
right.
But, an exit can still be like a narrative death, right? Um, which is from my interactions with someone who we haven't named yet, if I remember right so far, but from my interactions with this person, right, like, they're kind of the same for it's not so much I don't necessarily see that problem as of death as the problem, it's the narrative death. It's the end of a story.
Yeah.
Um, even in a yeah, I don't wanna put words in someone's mouth about, even in a satisfying way, but 'cause obviously not everybody's experience is satisfying in the same way as everyone else's, but, like, it's tough because sometimes
Well, this again comes back to having that conversation at the beginning, and if there is somebody that's uncomfortable with character death, narrative death, anything like that, set the standard of, "Hey, if it does come up, we will keep you in the loop so that you know what's going on and aren't
yeah,
blindsided by it." Because sometimes
yeah,
that's what matters for the character or for the player is that, yeah, their character doesn't know, but they're not comfortable not knowing.
yeah, and yeah, that's a that's a yeah, that's a huge thing, like, because sometimes, especially when you're, a fucking white middle class American guy like me, and like a lot of the guys I play with, like, you don't necessarily I feel like players and DMs, like RPGers of a certain era, like we didn't really think about that shit,
Yeah.
like
No,
it was
definitely how people approach it, and not just with the games changing and it becoming more of the role play and all of that. Uh, People have changed and how,
yeah.
they want to consume their media and, that kind of thing, and so you've gotta keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I was told my Instapot has beeped. Got a pork roast. But,
Ooh.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, and a lot of and sometimes it's really easy for both players and DMs to have their heads in their butts, right? Like, you're like some people in the end like, I think Sly Flourish says this a lot, like, like, don't as a DM, like, don't be clever, right? Like, if you're being clever, your players aren't gonna get it. You think you're being clever with a thing, you're not clever. You're being a bad or whatever, right? But it's so easy to do, like, we're like, "Oh, yeah, we're I'm gonna surprise them with this thing," and then, like, sometimes it works out and other times it doesn't. So, yeah, it's easy to kind of, like, get in your own head about a thing and then be like, "Oh, yeah, this is gonna be really cool," and, like, on a certain level, it's cool, and then on a certain level and for certain other people in that group or in that experience,
Not an
it's not the
enjoyable
same
thing,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to do. Let's, should we add our friend?
Yee she just
I
came
just
in, welcome,
I added
Kat.
myself.
Hello, friend.
Hello.
Go ahead and introduce yourself quick now that you're joining.
Oh, okay. Late intro. I'm Kat, also known as Autumn Knox, and the producer. And here I am to join the talk late to the party because why not?
Why not? So, Kat, as you know, because of course you're in our group, we're talking about character death. How do
Womp
you
womp.
feel? How do you feel about that occurrence?
I'm kind of on the fence about it.
Mm,
I haven't personally had a character die, but that's just because of my inexperience in gaming. Like being up until the channel, being such a casual, occasional gamer comparatively to a lot of people I know, I haven't necessarily experienced that. But sometimes when people are talking about, oh, your character may die in this game, some people are like, just put it out there, like, hey, it may die. So, I prepare for the inevitability. I'm like, am I going to have to roll up a character? Is it going to be intense like that? Because, like, I watch Maria's games and I'm like, shit, that's intense. Like, they have come this fucking close. Had it not been for some channel points, somebody would not have a character anymore, you know?
Chad saved Scoria's ass. Scoria, I've been
Yeah.
saying
oh,
Scoria would have been no Moria without Chad.
Yeah. So, is it going to be like that? And do I really deeply have to prepare or not? So I kind of put it in my mind that maybe, and I do, we talked about with Cyberpunk, there's the possibility out there. So I'm kind of, having myself kind of in the back of my mind saying, oh, Obscure could go a little too far sometime and not make it back, net running, that kind of thing. Um, but then there's other times where the DM's like, yeah, your character could die. And they like seem like they're getting some sort of joy out of it. And it kind of puts me off. Like, I'm not here to like fulfill some sort of like TK, total party kill, fantasy you have. Like, because I have met people who are like, yeah, I've never got, it's on my bucket list to like wipe out my party. And it's like, but why? Like,
Right.
why is that like a goal to like TPK?
Mhm.
You know, it's so it depends on the context of, how the game is and how it's presented to me in this instance. Cause I know that at some point in a long enough timeline, doing this as often as I do now, it is a much greater possibility that I will lose a character, which is for me one of those things where I have to consider because I get really attached to my characters, like super stupid attached to my characters. There's one character that I played early on in the channel. I played once, and I fucking love her, and want to be able to play her again. And I don't know if I ever will. So I don't know how I am quite gonna place that in my mind, losing a character like that. It's like at least in that context, I can play again. Maybe I could resurrect her in another game or whatever. But you know, actually having to play that out and whatever, because it's like then I have to ponder because I'm getting heavier into the RP than I used to be. And I'm actually playing the role, not just rolling the dice. How am I going
Mhm.
to play that? How do you
Yeah.
thematically fit that in? Because our games are pretty RP driven as opposed to dice driven. So
Yeah,
if a
one of the
spirit
things
dies,
that I mentioned earlier was giving the remaining characters and the new PC of the player who lost theirs, the chance to use it as an RP opportunity, give them reasons to continue, an affirmation of life. And you that's also another thing you've got to like lead in with like, hey, if your character does end up dying, how into the RP are you comfortable with? If you do get attached to this character, like what might be a step too far for you?
right? And there's that, but I honestly I don't know what my boundary would be because I really don't know because like on one side it's like you know I'm really attached to the character, so would I like have to like take a moment after they die and just like kind of cover my character and like walk away and take a breath for a minute and let everybody RP like the aftermath kind of thing, which I think thematically might fit in some instances too, is to like take that character that person completely off for a little bit so everybody else can kind of you know do the holy fuck this person's dead part. But also on the other hand, I'm also a writer. Like I'm not published, but I have been heavily writing and I've written a lot of like themes of death in this story I'm writing. So like, I can see different ways people deal with it and whatnot. So and just having had it touch my own life. So I mean I can see it from both sides, like how to deal with it, but I don't know how to put that together as a player because it's like, how does the person die too? Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
is obscure diet because like if you've read the Cyberpunk Red story that is in the manual, it ends with spoilers for anybody that wants to read it. Put your speakers on mute right now. It ends with Johnny Silverhand's girlfriend getting trapped in the net because he thinks she's dead and he takes her body. So she's trapped completely in that net at which one? It's I can't remember. It's the Asian in one.
Uh, uh, Akusura?
Arasaka. She gets
Arasaka.
she
Yeah.
gets trapped in the Arasaka net and forever. And she's at the end screaming, slamming her hands against the screen, but he doesn't see her because he's in his grief and takes her body. So she watches him take her body away. So it's like real fucking dramatic. So is it going to be like that? Like, if it's like hypothetically, if Obscura dies net running, is it that Lobo is like fucking bombed, distraught because he thinks she's dead and she's trapped and I've got to play that out? Or am I in a physical fight and I just get shot in the fucking face and can't dodge it? There's no playing that off. That's been
Right.
pretty much like
Mhm.
cover the camera, I'm dead.
Well, and that's
So
one of those things that leads into also like the differences between game systems. Like for example, since they're the 2 systems we play on the stream, D&D 5e and Cyberpunk, in D&D, you've got, like, Revivify, you've got, death saves. In Cyberpunk, if you hit 0 HP, you're dead. There's no coming
Yeah.
back from it. So,
Yeah.
that's one of those things you gotta go in knowing that, hey, if you get hit hard enough.
Right. And that's always a possibility with any game, like whether it's tabletop, card, minis, video, whatever, your characters can die. I just feel like in this instance, because I've been putting way more into it, like, oh, why did you not treat everybody to your delicate little sneeze?
Delicate? I
It is.
felt that.
It's
The
see,
actual sneeze was not very big. It's the buildup.
it looks more violent than it is. Like, it looks like hella violent, but it
Uh,
is like the most delicate little kind of thing. It's
Well, I
like,
don't wanna be rude, and so I mute myself. I've gotten used to it.
I
uh,
mean, I could hear
Maybe
it over
one day
here.
on
So,
Chaos, I will do it just so you all can hear
I
the
mean,
weird ass
honestly, I
sneezing.
could hear it over here, so it may have still gotten picked up.
it didn't.
So, like
But
a
yeah,
pain.
there's a big difference between like instant death and the kind of the long drawn out death that you usually get in 5e. Like in 5e, you can instantly die. I've come
If you're
close
hit
to
hard
instantly
enough,
dying
yeah.
before, but like I don't know anybody who's instantly died.
Yeah, for the
I
most
know
part,
I've
it's
heard of people who do that, but
It seems like a slow descent in some ways, like you're like dragging your fucking dead leg along with like
yeah.
1 HP before you finally like get the killing blow is what kind of like how I visualize it. But in some ways it's like, have you guys ever seen what is it? Zootopia?
yeah.
Where is it Zootopia? Yeah. Where she does like she's in the play and she does that long drawn out death scene. She's like, blood, 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 death. Sometimes I picture like just because of the way the D&D death is like slow, sometimes that's kind of what I picture sometimes
Mm.
because I'm like, it's I'm like, heal them because this is painful, you know.
Right.
But
Yeah.
when you're in the heat of that kind of battle too, and you're rolling dice and whatever, and you're like, just kind of like hanging there by the thread. How do you exactly like work in an RP to that? Because like you may be hanging by the thread for like a hot minute before you
Mhm.
actually take the shot, you
Right,
know?
and it's, like and they call it unconscious, so how everybody plays it out is if they're unconscious and making death saves, they just make that death save and then move past their turn. Like, that's all it's treated as.
Right. But then what happens when you miss the death save and then you're dead? Are you already unconscious? So it's just like the end? Or do you wake up
Uh,
and be like, I'm so sorry, and then go, you know?
and
Mhm.
see, there have been because like, I wanna say yeah, because like, in Maria's game where, Scoria was on death's door and was unconscious and making death
More
saves
than once in that combat.
more than
That was
once
a
in
lot
that
of death
combat.
saves.
There
That
was
was
the one
scary.
time that I made the natural 20 on my death save, which brought me back up to the 1 HP, and,
Mhm.
she explained it as, this purple glow infuses you and brings you back up, like, things like that are cool, but, in some like, how I've seen it played out a lot of times is if they fail the death saves and then they're just gone, is there was actually, recently when I saw Hi, Michael! Yes, this conversation is your fault.
Yes,
I blame you
that's
for
what I heard. I have
everything.
not really been on Discord like hardly at all today, except to message the two of them and be like, so do we have a topic? And then she's like, well, Michael and I were talking about. I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. So thanks.
Uh,
Actually, you helped us. A plus.
but it was described recently in the big show that we haven't been naming, but has had the whole thing happen recently that I'm trying not to spoil for people, uh,
No
where
spoilers.
they asked, "How can you tell?" Because they've been unconscious, how can you tell if they're just unconscious or if they're actually dead?
Mhm.
And, it's like, noticing like, I feel like I would like it if I have a character or if in one of my games somebody goes down, like give them the opportunity to like RP that a little bit where it's just like you roll it and then you're like their chest rises a little bit, but then it stutters for a second. And like that's how you RP out that you failed a death save. Like I
So
think
you
that
just
would make it
describe it.
yeah, because it was like they're like, I don't really know how you can tell that they're dead for real now. Like maybe
Check a
they it's
pulse.
a they released their last breath and you can hear it
I mean,
bullshit.
I
I'm
can give
like,
you lots of
Mhm.
descriptions on quiet endings. So I mean, if that's how it is, I got you because I know all
Yeah.
about that. So I mean, if that's the kind of thing, like I have like enough, that unfortunately I can draw
It's
on professional experience to give those descriptors, which is a little hard sometimes, but
yeah. It's
but
hard because in the chaos of combat, it's it can be overlooked, right?
right? And it's also one
Mhm.
of those things that for how drawn out combat is, especially in 5e, each round is only 6 seconds.
Mhm.
Each person that's acting on that round, it can be 10 people. It's happening in 6 seconds, so it's all happening at once. So
even if it
technically,
takes
you're not
hours.
getting all of these little bits of things. You're not getting,
Yeah.
like, this person made a really awesome attack and they got the kill, but these people are over here fighting, and so they didn't even see it.
Yeah,
Right.
if you have a 7 to 8 person group, wink,
Costs so
wink,
much.
nudge, nudge, it could be an hour before your turn comes back around.
We had a group that was like pushing that when we were doing our home game, and it's a lot. It's a
Yeah, I
lot.
had
Like
I started DMing for a table of 8 people my first time.
she did. And what, three of them were DMs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So or had DM'd at some point. So and then there was me who's like, I haven't played D&D since like 1999. So I don't know what I'm doing. And I
Mhm.
still struggle with it because it's still my least played game. Like literally I was making a roll for Avarice and I'm like, which one do I roll? Because I'm used to Cyberpunk, which is D10s, and then our Viking Death Squad stuff, which is D6s, and same with the Free League stuff. So I'm like, help me out here because I'm dumb.
Right.
I kind of felt like a tool having to ask like on stream, but at the same time, I was like, you know, that is what it is.
Oh,
But
Mm.
yeah, so it's
it,
definitely yeah, like, there's many different layers of getting to that point and, like, how do you wanna play it out?
Mhm.
that's one of the things. Like, do you like since the battles are drawn out enough, do you like side message
Yeah.
the person and be like, you're really close, so how do you want to play this if you go? Because you're
Yeah,
like on that thread, do you just message them just in case, you know, or is it when they fail the death save, you call attention to it so they can have that moment, and then whoever's, everybody can figure out within the realm of what they were doing at that time. Do they notice at the time, or is it an after thing they notice when they see the body later, kind of thing?
and that's
Keep
one
talking.
thing
I'll be right back. I have a roast to look at.
okay.
Yes, go look at your meat, Chad.
Uh, and now I forgot what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
Of course
I
it
said
had
some I said drawing attention to the death so everybody can
oh,
decide how
yes.
they play their role in it at the end.
That's another thing that gets me with, especially 5e, because with, like, healing word and stuff like that, is that a lot of people are just like, "Oh, hey, they're within 60 feet of me, I'm gonna cast healing word," and I'm like, "But can you even see them? Like, from where you're standing, can you see that they have, are hurt or fallen?" Or,
How do
it's one
you
of those
yeah.
things like, I know that in the moment, it's not as big of a deal most of the time, like, it's just keeping it going, and they're like, "Okay, yes, I do this," and, "Okay, awesome."
With
Uh,
with that, so me personally with like the healing things, just from the standpoint of unfortunately from the standpoint of medical professional, that's something like along with the healing check, I would do like a concentration thing because you have to see if you can concentrate in the heat of battle enough to say that person's really fucking hosed right now and I can see it. So I'm going to do this really quick because there's a lot of stress going on around. So I
right.
think that's how I would quantify something like that is, can you concentrate enough to pull that off? because this is a stress situation and you have to be able to function under stress to do, you know, that
Yeah, I
that
definitely feel like that's something that I would want to explore in like a mini campaign where, we're only going for a few sessions. It's like, all right, if you make these checks, you've also got to make a concentration check to make sure that you can actually pull it off because that
yeah.
does make sense.
Yeah, because sometimes with some of the high stakes stuff, like the lower stakes stuff, whatever, it's like a piddly fighter. It's going to be like a cheeseball thing that they push through just because it's driving the story forward. It's not like a big deal. But when it's high stakes, you know, you can't just like, hey, I'm going to whip out this thing that it takes a lot of concentration, and I may not be able to pull off because there is all of this other shit going on around me. It's I think it's a judgment call as things go,
Yeah.
but there are some situations where it's like, can you really do that right now? Like, even as a player, I'm like, if you let me pull something cool off, or you're like, you check me, like, can you do that with what you have in front of you for your stats? I mean, I get it.
Right, yeah.
So
And usually that comes up with things like, "Oh, I wanna pull off this cool move." So, "Oh, acrobatics check," that kind of thing.
right.
Uh, but I do feel like the whole noticing that somebody is hurt, and because at the table, you can just call out, "Who needs healing?" And, people are gonna say, "Well, this is what my hit points are at." And that's how
But
people are used to playing, so
but when you're RPing, you're not going to stand there in the middle of a fight and be like, who needs healed?
yeah,
It's in the middle, you're in the middle of a fight. You're trying to defend yourself and assess the situation around you. So you may miss things, and you have to be able to quantify whether or not you saw that,
yep,
to save that person's ass from dying. So I think that's something that does get overlooked sometimes. Like, I get it if you're just like fucking around and it's not a serious like RP heavy thing, you're just rolling dice at home. But when, like with our stuff, we RP this stuff, you
yep,
know, and a lot of the other channels that of our peers that we know RP this stuff. So it's different in that regard. So you can't
yeah.
just be like, hi, here I am to heal you because I can. There's nothing else going on that I have to pay attention to. You can't just blithely, skip through it like that.
Yeah, I
Even if
think
your
one of
character
the
is that oblivious, you still have to roll to make sure they stay that way.
right, I think the closest that we really get is if somebody, like, wants to give better healing than healing word or didn't take healing word and just has cure wounds, which you have to touch them, is then you've gotta figure out how to get to them and then
Mhm.
to heal them. So, it's definitely something that I'm looking at more, especially with the more systems that I look at for various mini campaigns and other things that, uh, I'm interested in doing, and it's definitely one of those things that is kind of like I get that a lot of people don't like to think about death or whatever, like, okay,
It's
that's
smart.
totally fine. Uh, and I think that that's part of the reason a lot of people kinda gloss over the whole thing, and they're just like, "Oh, yes, I would notice if they were hurt," kinda thing.
But would
Uh,
you?
yeah, like, it's not something that people just kinda sit there and actually think, "Well, would I notice in this situation if somebody
Well,
was hurt?"
and death is a hard conversation. I will be very honest
Yeah.
with the whole ass world right here. I did lose my father last year, and my best friend lost her father the year before, and I spent a lot of time with her. My other best friend, I have three, so one of the three I spent the day with, and she and I were both discussing that loss, and it is a hard conversation to have. Like, and so when you've gone through something like that, and for me in healthcare, having faced a lot of death, you know, death can be a touchy subject in general to face. And when you're playing a game where you want to have fun, sometimes those themes can hit you in the wrong way. So you do have to be careful navigating those waters, but at the same time, there are times when you have to accept that it is something that is going to happen. Are we watching you eat a muffin right now? I'm talking about serious, heavy ass subject matter, and you're eating muffins.
The chocolate chip pumpkin spice muffin.
Oh,
Oh, now
oh,
I'm jealous.
yeah, yeah. This is what you can do with your pumpkin spice muffin, bro.
And your weather.
We love you, but
Oh, it's
right
really
now.
good.
Anyway,
Mhm.
so I mean, there's some of the death things you do. It's the lines and veils thing, and it is something that you need to establish ahead of time, like how much of that can you handle? Like it's not going to be like it's like none of our games are death heavy. You know, Maria comes real close, but she rides that line really well with that. She's
Well, and
her,
she before we ever started to play, laid out, "The way I run a game is the only way you're going to succeed is to work together, and we keep splitting the fucking party."
yes, you and she's said it a couple of times. She even told me like we were like talking like before or after wizardry one day, and she told me that, and I was like, they have not understood the assignment then. Because you guys split the party, you guys nearly fucking died every time.
Well, and
So,
even in the Gala one, like, we weren't technically split as a party,
but you weren't
but we
working
were
together.
spread out enough that it was like we were split as a
Yeah,
party.
you guys really didn't like come together enough. You guys need to revise that approach. But I heard that in the last game you were talking about like let's not split up. So you're getting it, but it's just, but it's not something that's necessarily an omnipresent thing in the game that you're
Yeah,
gonna die unless it's like there's one it's the one you're gonna run later, the 10 candles one or
yep,
whatever.
10 candles.
That one is much heavier, so that from the outset people are gonna know anyway. But it's still like people don't like facing mortality in their recreation. So it is still kind of hard when you're, faced with the fact that you've put a lot into this character in this format. You're RPing it, so you're putting a lot of feeling into it, and now you're going to lose that character. So there is a feeling of loss. I feel like would be for the player just as much as the party in general, but definitely for the player because it can be a real personal thing when you're playing that role. You know.
And that
So
does touch on another point I actually put in, is another mechanic that, I'm actually utilizing in Cyberpunk if it happens. Give them a way to live on in the next character they play.
yeah, I like that thing that you've come up with. You want to explain that a little bit for everybody because it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, for the Cyberpunk game, they all picked out all of their cyberware and everything like that, and I told all of them that they at least needed to have the neural wear because every person in my setting has behind their ear a piece of cyberware that basically records memories, thoughts, feelings, like who the person is in the best way possible. And then if, say, Obscura did get stuck in the net or was killed or whatnot, then the next character Cat comes in with finds that piece of cyberware
Mm.
and inserts it. Like they're curious about who this person was. And with how I'm utilizing it is some of those feelings and those memories become the new player or the new characters. So like this new character meets Lobo and is like, "Oh, hey, this is my brother." Even though it's not true, the feelings are there. And I
Um,
think that if it does happen, that's gonna be a really interesting thing that'll happen where this person comes in and is like, "Oh, I know all these things about all of you, and this is how I feel about you." And everybody else is like, "We just met you."
Who the fuck are you?
yeah,
Yeah.
and like and just seeing how like Tim would play that with his delightfully dumb Lobo. Like I will never not say that I adore like how he plays that character and how he set him up. It's just so amazing. And so seeing how that would play out too, because the one big thing that he loves more than anything is his sister. That is one of the most important things in his life. So that would be interesting how that plays out. Not that I am advocating for Obscura to die because I love
No.
that character and I will hang
Yeah,
on to
no.
her as long as
I
I
was just
can.
using it as
It's
an
a good
example,
hypothetical.
especially with the tightness between you as
Yeah.
siblings.
No, it's a good hypothetical and like just even like theorizing like how that would go is fascinating because like then I have to think from my perspective, what is this new character like? Like how different is this character from Obscura? Are they even a woman? Or and how would they play it with they have all these memories of the trauma of Lobo and how deeply they care about she cares about her brother and whatever else has happened, so it would be a very interesting dynamic. So I like that you made that mechanic, so if we have to play that with any of the characters it'll be interesting to see how that goes because it's pretty cool.
It's actually I'm play testing it for a TTRPG I'm writing.
Mhm.
And, but I'm like, it's one of those things that it also adds another layer of RP to what can happen. So
Mhm.
it's like, this character is acting towards the other in a way that they're not ready for, and then how did they react?
It's like, again, let's just swing around to Obscure and Lobo. Obscure's gone. How is he grieving? What happens to him, especially if there's other things that are out there that aren't resolved or whatever. How does he go on? Because his sister basically, like, they're like really tight, and she helps him through life sometimes, and he helps her whether she admits it or not. And how does that, what happens when this person comes along? It's like, I know you, you know so that I especially if he's still grieving, how does that
Right.
play out? So it would be interesting to see how that goes, just from a curiosity standpoint, to see how that would be RP'd. So I don't know, maybe we have to have an alternate universe day. Try it out.
Right?
It's like a nightmare thing. Like, literally, we lean into the name, and something happens at the party, and they end up in some sort of like shared nightmare kind of thing.
Maybe this should be the season 2 opener.
Maybe. Well, you did. Do you get there's the season two finale, season
That's
one
true,
finale,
that's true.
so you'd have to see how that plays out together. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's a thing
just
to think about.
it's something to consider, so you can actually test the mechanic, because you
Yeah,
otherwise have no way to test it unless somebody dies, and you can't guarantee that will or will not happen. You know?
right, especially since we've been way more RP heavy than, even, like, the battles get truncated via RP a lot of the time,
Yeah,
so
which is fine. Like, I find this to be like really cool and entertaining, because it's really letting me stretch my RP skills that I have not gotten to do prior. Just because of how I've always played in the past. So it's really awesome for me, because I'm getting to like stretch more in a way that I've never done before, between this and now Abris, which is completely different. Which is a good fucking time, let me tell you. But
Yeah.
so that part's fine, but it would be interesting. So maybe it's something we'll talk about later, because
Okay.
It could be a it could be
I
a
just
it could
came
be
up
a
with that one just now.
matrix construct.
Huh?
Could be a matrix or a net construct, right?
Yeah, something like that, or just something where they all end up in like a shared like vision, like they're unconscious and like in this shared vision, and then they got to get their way out, kind of thing. I'm just coming up
But
with this. I'm literally pulling this out of my ass right now, but it would be cool.
yeah,
So we'll
but
figure that out
also
later, because I don't want to mess it up too much, since it's still
Yeah.
kind of rolling in my brain.
remember, don't be too clever. Let the players know what's happening
Yeah.
so they can role
Oh,
play.
yeah, no, that would be
Don't
something that would
surprise your
definitely
players
prep
with that.
them
Like,
for,
"Oh, wait,
yeah.
your character died? Remember, that was a dream."
Yeah,
Don't do it.
to me, it'd be one of those things where it's not like fully, like, maybe not fully explained, but it's enough that they know that this isn't quite real, but maybe in character they don't. Kind of
Right, it
a
would definitely
Yeah,
be
yeah.
something where, especially to test the mechanic, like, I would warn them at the beginning, "Some of you are gonna die, and you need to have this alternate character ready that's gonna do this thing, but it's just a vision, and you're gonna go back to your regular
yeah,
character." Like,
yeah,
that's
this isn't permanent.
definitely something I would lead with.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because then we have to roll up new characters anyway, so we would have to kind of know in advance, because nobody wants to sit there for a half an hour watching us roll up new characters on screen.
Yeah, no.
So
That's just good
that
TV.
also, yeah. So there's not any of that. This would have to be a kind of a partially planned kind of event,
Yeah.
and it'd be more of, the audience doesn't know when it's coming, and if they haven't watched this episode of Curiosities, they don't know it's coming at all. So, you know, but yeah, that'd be kind of cool just to test it. And then explore the idea of, how do you RP being dead or grieving, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah, that's a super
there you
cool
go.
idea.
That's the biggest idea I've had today. Everything else is going to be salad. Bad word salad.
But yeah, what we've discovered here is that if you do it in a way that honors the character and you make sure that all of the players are in on that it could happen or is going to happen and they're prepared for it, then make it, you can make it work, but it's definitely one of those things that as players, you need to be upfront with them about and make sure that that conversation is constantly happening and making sure that they're okay with the directions things are going.
Yeah,
Because
and
Yeah,
that
while
don't be just
as
reading about
right, as like a DM, if a player came to me and said, "Hey, I really don't want to play this character anymore. Can we kill them off?" Like that's one of those things that again with the being clever, you might want think it'll be cool to surprise the whole party with it, but they may not be cool with that.
right. It's not always as cool as you think.
I think some of that stuff, like, it just depends on how you play it. There's being too overly clever, which I know you're not a fan of, Chad, and then there's surprise for the sake of driving the role play forward.
Yeah.
Some surprises have to happen, and whether you like
Oh,
it or
yeah,
not,
absolutely.
because it pushes the players to RP and move in a different direction they may not have planned, and you need
Mhm.
that for your story. So it just that is situational as well. You know, you may need to surprise them with a death because it's going to propel your story in a new direction that you're trying to go. You know,
I
so
mean, sometimes it is exactly like Harvey Keitel's character in, Reservoir Dogs says it, you just gotta shake it up. Somebody's gotta die in order for everyone to learn
yeah. So,
sometimes.
it's one thing to just try to be like, "Oh, I'm so cool," but then it's other thing is like this story is going to start moving in this direction and this is the catalyst. And part of that
Yeah.
catalyst is the element of surprise. Maybe the player that's going to die and roll up a new characters in on it, but for story's sake,
Yeah,
the rest of the party is not. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and how you actually role play it and actually work it in
yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
the
Well, and
story and
again,
write
and
it.
also conversations you've had up to that point, if the other players are even okay with that being a surprise.
Right.
Yeah, it's
And
really about that table culture, I think,
Yeah,
yeah, and I
it
think honestly, I think most of our table cultures are fine. I wouldn't be too concerned about it with most of our people. It's more of one of those things. It's like you have to sit down and ask yourself, is this for the story or is this because I'm just trying to be and if you're
mm,
not self-aware enough to answer that question honestly, maybe you shouldn't be even doing it because you
don't
have
do
to
it.
be really
Don't do it.
self-aware. you know
Yeah.
that takes a lot of self-awareness to understand why you're doing this, because if you're doing
Mhm.
something for the rule of cool, that is not the thing to use. But if you're doing something for your story and it is pertinent and important, probably not as bad. It's
Yeah.
just it really it's there's a lot of communication and like thought that has to go into that kind of thing. You can't just be like, "Ooh,
absolutely,
you're gonna die today. Roll up a new character, surprise!"
yeah.
Mhm.
You know?
That's kind of a big thing that we're dealing with in at the threshold, right? Like the nature of the game, of the narrative of the game has been that the characters don't know what's up. Like you don't know who you are, what your background is.
Hmm.
And some of the players were like, here's some stuff for my background. And then I'm like, okay, here's I've taken this and kind of tweaked this. I can show it to you. And they're like, some of them are like, nah, it's cool. I trust you. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out. And
Well,
that's
and
like, but that's like a stated thing. Like we've had that discussion,
yeah, you're playing an
and some
amnesiac,
people are like,
so
yeah,
there's going to be an element of surprise there because you have
yeah,
amnesia. And
right.
that's stated from the outset that you're going to have surprises.
Yeah.
That is a story of surprises. So at least you've
And
that.
even that I don't necessarily feel 100% comfortable with. Like I want any surprise I want the majority of surprise that happens at the table in that game to be from a player. Like I don't want to surprise them. I would rather oh, there's this thing about your character that I know and player.
But the other
Oh,
players don't know.
right, the other players don't know and the other characters don't know and then this reveal happens and it's like, oh, it's there because it's there. It's like we're surprising them with whatever this thing is, and it's less of a I'm not I'm not being clever in the same way. I don't know,
It
but
just
Well,
depends on
and
what
it's
it is too.
yeah, and
Is
that's
it
just something
yeah,
that every DM and GM does is they're
yeah,
given a backstory, whether it's a couple sentences or 6 pages, and they take that story and fit it into their narrative, and
hmm
they work it around that, and so there's gonna be a level of that in any game that is played that the player is giving over some form of control over their character to the DM.
kind of like with Obscure and Lobo? You know, we're just like, here's our backstory, and you're like, cool.
I
Yep.
was like, the original story I was gonna go with was good, but damn, this is better.
It's
yeah,
getting juicier, but it's so like with your game, Chad. It's you have like an established idea that there will be surprises. You've talked one on one with your players about different things about their characters that, and then kind of nudge them to reveal it and RP it themselves as they remember. So you have elements of surprise that you do spring on people I've seen, and then elements where you're like, nudge, you remember this shit. Here you go. So
hmm
it's a mix.
yeah,
The other players will be surprised because they don't know this person's story like the two of you have talked about, but there is some element of knowing too. And then there's other things where like, here's this thing.
That's why
Oh,
I
hmm
specifically had Astray having her archaeology journal so that she had something that I could be like, "Hey, can I roll a history check?" And then he's like, "Alright, you find in your journal."
yeah. It's surprise can be useful and a good mechanism, and then sometimes not. It just depends on the situation and how you handle it.
yeah,
It's it's not something you want to use all the time because then it loses its shine too, and it loses its purpose. Then it's just like, oh, how many times are you going to jump scare me in this game today? You know, so it's just
nine,
it's how you use it and when.
It's
yeah,
all about balance.
yeah. Sometimes you get a good death. Sometimes you're wash. It's right.
You just reminded
Don't
me
Joss
of
Whedon.
the worst
Don't
joke
Joss don't
ever.
Joss Whedon your characters.
How did reavers clean their lances? They put it through the wash. Sorry, Cat. I know you don't watch
How
the
have I
show.
Yeah, I have
never
no
how have I
idea.
never
I'm
heard that
guessing
joke?
he got run through and died because I know that's a character. That's all I
Yeah.
got. Like, I
He
am
was
sorry to the nerd world, but I am not a brown coat. I just didn't get into it. So I'm
That's
That's
sorry.
fine.
perfectly
That's
You
valid.
can all
yeah.
like try and murder me later, but it's not every fandom for everybody. Yeah.
It's like
So I
that.
don't get the joke
I
fully.
yeah, but that's a great example because like we who watched it, right? We're set up like in the series. This is the tone. These are the stakes. There was never at no point in that show were there stakes that a character was going to die. It was never. And I've rewatched that show more times than I
Right.
want to
Well, and
count.
then they come to the movie and they're like, "All right, they've given us this to wrap things up. Who are we gonna kill?" Was like the first thing said on the floor, I swear.
Right.
But then like
Yeah.
you do other things when you go into the element of death and surprise. You go into other things in Whedon's stories, particularly like for as problematic as he's become, there are some parts where he did, they were interesting, like in Buffy, the episode The Body, where her mom dies. And it is sudden and it is out of fucking nowhere and it's a surprise. And like then just the aftermath and how that was all handled was like, it was intense, but that surprise drove the story forward. And that's kind of what I'm talking about
Mhm.
when I say
Yeah.
you surprise somebody with a death, it has to be something to propel the story. And it really like pushed it in a whole other
Mhm.
direction and the characters and everything and showing how everybody deals with grief and kind of that kind of thing. So, that's kind of, maybe some of the deaths in Firefly and whatever were meh, and there's no stakes to really justify it. But that one, in terms of surprise, fits narratively, so
Yeah.
that's kind of
And
where I,
realistically, of the two deaths in Serenity, Wash's was I hate it because I love Wash, but Wash's was fucking fantastic.
No, it did he handled it really well, and, like, it was towards
Shepard's
the
death
end of
was
it, so there was
garbage.
hmm. We'll
Well,
talk about that later.
you can spoil it
But,
for me because the likelihood that I will see it in context is slim because I just don't have time
Oh,
to
we're
barely
gonna
watch
the
the game.
watch it.
differences in them, Wash for his like,
Good luck
he
making me
had
sit
literally
still.
yeah, he had just, uh, delivered, like, this great line, done this great thing, and then it's a sudden thing that happens, and then he, like, revises the line, and, like, then he's got his wife, and you have to deal with her finding out about it, and, like, it's towards the end, so they don't touch on it a whole lot, but they do still touch on the grief of it.
Mhm.
Whereas with Shepard, they basically left him out of most of the movie, which pissed me off because I fucking love Shepard book.
He was
And
the
then
priest guy, right?
the priest
He
guy,
was the
yeah.
priest, yeah.
Okay. I saw like the first couple episodes, so I kind of have an idea of who some of the characters are. So I'm just trying to follow along. Anyway,
Yeah, so then, like, they go and visit him, and he basically gives Mal a lecture, and then they go back for something, and the Reavers have attacked, and everybody is already dead except for Book, who has the last final words for Mal to make Mal be a better person, which isn't gonna fucking happen. So
that sounds lame as fuck. I'm sorry, like that just sounds lame.
and,
Yeah,
like,
it
they
was
could have done so much with his character and, like, how they had built him up through the series
Well, and I
and
like
made
that
it a
actor. You know,
really poignant moment, and it just fell so fucking flat.
mhm.
I mean, I've heard that complaint about that before. I just didn't know what
Yeah.
all of it was. So that sounds even worse now hearing the description. So
Yeah. It would have been better if he would have died off screen.
It would've, yeah.
Like,
that's terrible.
Well, and then
and
technically
that
there is
sucked.
another death, not of a main character, but of a character they introduced that's, like, becomes sort of a main character in the storyline of Serenity that they kill. And he's run through with a sword by, like, this main antagonist that they've built up, and then he has a message for Mal, so he talks through his fucking sex bot,
Oh,
close
right.
to death, and it's like,
Cool.
"Kill me, Mal. He killed me with a sword," but coming through this, like, what's supposed to be a sex robot, and I'm like, oh, Michael did say that, the Shepherd book death was driven by the fact that Ron Glass had cancer at the time, and it was not going well. I mean,
Which,
still would have been better left off screen.
yeah, why put the guy through that? You know, that's. But maybe he wanted to be part of it somehow too. I
Yeah.
mean, there could be extenuating circumstances, but it still could have like sounds like it could have been done in a much better way that would have
Well,
done a
and they
service
could
to
have
the actor
introduced
trying to do the thing and the character. You know.
yeah, and they could have still introduced him in the way that they did and just had him in that one part, and then they go back and he's already dead. It was the part where he was dying in that moment and basically trying to hammer the same shit into Mel's head that he'd been trying to hammer into it the entire fucking show.
Yeah, it sounds like even like with this reasoning why he wasn't terribly involved, there's still like many ways that it sounds like it could have been done better for the character.
Yeah.
And realistically, at least he didn't become space Jesus and like exist in a vacuum and like do things
Maybe
like
that would
that.
have been
Cough,
better.
cough,
Still
Carrie Fisher.
I
Cough,
still
cough.
maintain
Princess Leia.
the best thing to come out of that show at all is when Book Shepherd Book and River, when she got a hold of his Bible and she's like, "It's wrong. Things are out of order. We need to change it. We need to pull out these pages entirely. Like the book is wrong." And he's like, he admits that it's about the stories and the metaphors, and it's actually
Mhm.
a really good moment. But anyways, enough about Firefly.
I mean, we're
Eh,
talking about the death parts, so I mean, it still applies. You know
Yeah,
how
yeah.
bad ways to handle death, good ways to handle.
yeah, exactly.
You know,
Like, if you're in the game and there is a character that's gonna die, like, A, don't just brush it off. B, make it either drive the story or make it matter or make it mean something post fact, like, don't just oh, hey, look, not here anymore. You can't see me.
Yeah. You know,
You can't see me.
it just depends on the context. It depends on the
Yeah.
game too. Like, is the character more of a comedic character, or and then they have a poignant moment, or are they a shit talker and they go out in a blaze of shit talking glory? So there's always those things too.
I really want to find and figure out a way to have like a wash death at the table.
Side
'Cause
note,
it's
I
'cause it's
I
super
have
hard.
the PDF for the Firefly
Oh,
TTBRG.
I've got the books right here. But I'm saying like it's so hard even like even back in the day playing it, first, second edition. Like it's so hard to have that like, oh fuck, he's dead. We can't deal with this right now, you know, how and then have the story keep going. Like because I think that's an interesting narrative as well. It's a different narrative. It's an interesting narrative, but it's really hard to do because a lot of times we're so wrapped up in it and the turns in say in 5e take so long, right? Yeah. I really want to figure out where that
I mean,
line
they still
is.
take less time than some other games that I've played where the mechanics
Cough cough Palladium.
drag it out, but also like I get giving the death saves as a way
Yeah.
for this character to come back. I get having, the options of revivify and all that. But man, make the mechanic a little easier to do in the like actual playing of the game. Cuz it's just like, oh, it's your turn, roll your death save, and then it moves past it. And then it's all like if they do finally die, that's when the theatrics happen, and that's not actually how it happened.
No, not always. Not every death is theatrical or dramatic. Sometimes it's just a matter of a sigh and that's it. You know,
Mhm.
and that's and you also like in those instances too. Like I don't think when people talk about like how your character dies and how they play it, you gotta look at what's happened to the character's being. Like, how are they injured? Like, what happened to them that put them in that state? If they've taken a lot of body blows and they're like barely conscious, they're probably not going to have some sort of monologue. You know, they might be able to wake up enough to say two words at most.
Right.
So, like, you also have to look at like how they're going out. Like, is it a self-sacrifice situation where they're going to go out on their terms and they're conscious, but they know that when they do this, it's it, kind of thing. Then they may have that one liner on the way out. But if they're like, you know, that, and they're not going to have a lot to say. It's just going to be, so it's that there's also that to consider too, you
And that's
know.
one of the things that I think it makes it a little bit easier with, like, say, Cyberpunk, where if you hit 0 HP, you're gone. But they also have it built in, like, you're not doing the death saves, but they've got different levels of the amount you're injured and how it affects how you roll for, like, attacks and stuff and how your character is physically. So you, like, have to, like, role play through that, like, where you're at a point.
Yeah,
So
because if you've
Mhm.
been like stabbed or shot or something, and you're like on your critical, levels of damage, you're not going to be standing there like, all right, let's go with your guns blazing. You're going to be like laying on the ground trying to like, just kind of like trying to shoot maybe, and your hand is shaking, and you might make the shot if you're really lucky with your roll, but you can barely function if at all. So
yeah.
I like that too, because you can kind of see where you're at and how your next steps are going to go if you can.
Whereas with D&D, you're basically, yeah, you're low on HP, but that's not making a deficit to anything you're doing. It's
Yeah,
just 1 second you're conscious, the next second you're unconscious.
and I kind of think to some extent that can also be a DM call too. Oh, you have 2 HP left, you better roll like a concentration or something, like some sort of stat check to see if you can pull this off with where you're at right now, because you're fucked up. Like,
Right.
you're dragging your broken leg along and half conscious, you know how do you think that you're going to take a swipe at this person with a sword, you know? So that's, I think in that case, like with stuff like that, I think the DM really needs to take a look at the situation. Like, I don't think that you're going to be able to do that easily. There's a disadvantage here, and
Right.
should
Well, and that's the thing
call
that a
that.
lot of people have been calling out about D&D 5e or any of the other versions specifically, and being like, instead of trying to make how you wanna play the game fit this system, maybe try other systems, which, is a
Or use
completely valid way to do. Yeah.
what's in front of you, because like I've seen that in D&D games where it's like, yeah, I've got 2 hit points. I'm gonna go stab this motherfucker, and I'm gonna go up and punch him in the face and use flurry of blows. It's like you've taken a lot of damage. It's like, me, like, just looking at it from a perspective of, what's happened to this person. And maybe that's just the analytical part of me. It's like, I don't think you're going to necessarily be able to do the flurry of blows. You might be able to hit them once if you're lucky, you know. But I think at that point, that's where you use what you have in front of you to your advantage to make them RP that, or to overcome that, and pick the stats that might be pertinent and say, you have to roll against that though,
Hmm.
to see if you can pull it off. Just to up the stakes, make it more, you know, realistically, realistic in that you may not be able to fight, because I see a lot of people play it and they just skip along with 2 hit points and I'm going to go murder all the things still. And I don't feel like that. I think it does a disservice to the battle in general and the taking of the damage. It makes it pointless then. Like, I
Yeah.
can
I
take
would
20 points of damage and be fine.
I would offer this, because this is a fantastic discussion. Uh, this point that you brought up is, I think, in a very real way, to use, say, to use like movie analogs, right? 5e is the Avengers, right? It, none of that shit matters. One hit point,
Right.
a million hit points, it's all the same, right?
Right.
Whereas, like, and that's kind of where the tone is in the mechanics and in the narrative from the mechanics and like WotC and whatever. Like, that's a very much like it's whereas like and it's not really simulation-y, right? Whereas like, say, back in the day, like, you could argue that even like first and second edition was still kind of Avengers-ish in that way. Like, death was easy, but the consequences of damage were nothing because that's how D&D's always been. But like, it's a very different tone between, like, say, the Avengers and some movie that where people die, or where fights are hard when you take damage. It's a and some people don't want that. Some people
Right.
do. Some
Well,
people do. Some people don't. Some
and
people don't
that's
know that they want that.
That's also, well, and for a long time, I didn't know that I would want stuff like that. But now, as I'm playing more, I see that, like, there is something to be said of making it matter, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
Now, I get that some people are going to sit down at the table and they're just going to play a game of fuck around, find out, or kill it or fuck it, or whatever, and not have those consequences because they're just having a good time and that's all they want to do.
Yeah,
And that depends on the table and the players and what
yeah.
you're setting out to do by playing the game you know but there's also, I see a lot of opportunity for people to use the stats that all of these players have to the advantage of making things matter. So that's up to up to the DM and the players and what they want to accomplish. There's ways to
Mm,
make it not be like the fucking Avengers or some 80s movie
mhm,
where you can be fucked up and still running through guns blazing. So that's just all in how you want to play it and
Yep.
what you want. But I see a lot of people not using, like, I'll catch bits and pieces here and there, and then that's like the damage doesn't matter, but it can, you know.
Right.
mhm,
Well, and then another reason, like, a lot of times I'll pull in NPCs as who they're fighting is those NPCs will also get death saves. Whereas when you
Mhm.
go up against a monster, there's no rules for it's like, oh, if you kill it, you kill it. They don't go unconscious. They're just dead.
I
Mhm.
mean, you could play it that way, you know.
Yeah.
That's also a choice and a
Yeah.
preference, you know. And that's, you know, you can change that on the fly. You know, that was a conversation you and I had in the beginning when you're first starting to DM, because it wasn't, you know, people weren't going the way you wanted to. I'm like, well, you're God, just change it on the fly, you know. So if you think the monster should last a little longer, well, you know what? They did this thing that they have in their back pocket, and oh look, they have a couple extra hit points, or oh no, they
Oh,
made
the
the death
number of
save.
times in Artena that I've doubled the fucking monster's hit points because I underestimated
Yeah, you know, but
what was
and
gonna
nobody needs
happen.
to know that, and you don't need to get mad about it. Just tweak it on the fly. So you just gotta be able to change on a dime just to make sure that you're accomplishing the goals that you want and driving things the way you
Mhm.
want them to. You know, players are going to go off the rails to some extent. It always happens, but you can still redirect. You know, so and that's the same thing with making things matter. It's like, oh, suddenly no, this actually does matter, so I may need to play this a little differently, because it also makes them make choices, you know, as opposed to just, I'm going to go throw this fireball out here until the end of time. Doesn't matter how low I get. Now they have to make a choice. What do I actually put my energy into? You know, and making choices can drive RP, you know. So that's always what I think about as I look at how games are run and thinking about doing more myself, because like I'm doing the one shot next month, but I also do want to do like a mini campaign of the Blade Runner when it gets here. I mean, I have the PDFs, but I'd like to, you know,
Yeah.
and that's going to be serious. That's going to be a much heavier game than the two, you know, by then the two that I've at least run, you know. So because the next one I'm running is a My Little Pony game. There's no fucking stakes in that. That's going to be balls to the wall bullshit, having a good time, you know. So, you know, so I look at this as I'm playing Cyberpunk, I'm watching all of your games and things like that. It's like I want to make sure that things matter when I do it in a more serious way. Because the two things I've done,
Mhm.
you know, the one thing I've done already and the one thing I'm going to is are not serious. We were just having a good
Right.
time, you
Yeah.
know? So and that matters too. What are you there for? So
Yeah, and
Yeah,
another
it's
note that
definitely
I've noticed is sorry, Chad. Go ahead.
oh, I was just say that's a great thing to talk about in session 0 is like where the tension is going to be, right? Is the tension death, and is the tension the spectrum of damage, like, and what it means, you know, or is it just kind of the narrative stakes of action, or is it
a little bit of both sometimes.
I'm out of beer now? That's the tension. Fuck. Yeah,
You know,
100%.
But yeah,
like
another thing that touches on all of this, with Cyberpunk, the only way to get HP back is to go to a med tech or to go for surgery and actually have them make the rolls to get that. It's not like 5e where, oh, I have 2 of my 150 hit points left. I'm gonna sleep and get all 148 hit points
yeah,
back.
there's no long rest. You know, and that's something besides Cyberpunk is you actually have to actively figure out how to get fixed. You
Mhm.
know, otherwise you're gonna be stuck like that forever. You might, you know, over time heal as the body heals naturally, but that it's
Or
certain
get
things take a
cyberware
long
to, take its place, but
yeah, right. You know, like Obscura lost an arm, you know, you know, in the you know, the prologue of the story, so she has a fiber arm. You know, she didn't just like let it sit there and like maybe it'll grow back, you know. I'll take a long rest, it'll be fine, you know. So, you know, it did it that does raise the stakes too on taking
Mhm.
damage. You know, we have a med tech in our party, which is cool, but not every game you play you're gonna have that because everybody wants to play that role. So, you know, that is definitely something that's cool about that.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
yes, death in games and how we handle it. I think that we made a lot of really good points and had a good conversation about it. Thanks,
A plus really helped because I messaged the two of them earlier. I'm like, what are we gonna talk about? Because
Michael.
I just had nothing today. This was not my brain day.
And remember, Michael, you were the bomb in Phantoms, just like Ben Affleck.
But
Well, that was fun.
anyways, yeah, that was. So yes, thanks everyone for coming out and listen to us talk about how we feel about character death in games, and if you are gonna do it, ways to make it make sense. And always remember, communicate with your players.
Yes.
But I have been Kristen. You can find me on the internet at Darcereelish. You can find me on here quite often. And you can find me on Saturday nights on Exquisite Corpse Presents. Once
I've
again,
been Chad. You can find me right here. I'm Real CMG on Twitter. Um,
Tomorrow.
tomorrow I have tomorrow I've got a
Thursday.
show right here called At the Threshold, where we're playing Dungeons and Dragons in Sly Flourish's City of Arches. It's a lot of fun. I'm excited. Also, um, keep your ear to the wall. I'll have some cool announcements about things soon. Um,
Yes, very
oh,
soon.
hey, can I should let me pimp a one shot I'm running. Let me pimp a one shot I'm
You should
running.
pimp that because it's in like 2 weeks.
So bad.
I
So
was thinking,
bad at
like,
this.
why don't you just say it? Because it's coming real quick.
Yeah. Hey, I'm running a one shot on October 1st. We have to talk about the time still, but it'll probably be in the in the afternoon or evening. But we're running I'll be running the quick start scenario from the Dragonbane RPG, which is Free League's current Kickstarter that ends in like 2 days. It just finished the entirety of its stretch goals. It's a conversion of a long running Swedish fantasy RPG. It looks fucking amazing. If you follow Free League, it's the same
Really
artist
does some sick shit. They're amazing.
who did the art for Basin and shit. So it's really good. I'm excited to run it. So yeah, join us for that. Well, there'll be a blurb on Twitter about it soon,
Yeah.
or in
Okay.
our Discord channel if you're in our Discord channel.
There'll be promos. It'll happen. That's I got it. Right. Oh, it's my turn, huh?
Yay.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, you
I'm
go.
Kat, and you can find me as Autumn Knox on Twitter, and you can find me here on most Wednesdays now and Fridays for our Cyberpunk game at 7 p.m. Pacific, and one more Monday, I will be guesting as Abris the Absurd on Artena and sending our players on their way for their quest. And yeah, the rest of the time I'm just kind of back here pushing the buttons.
And Obscura is gonna be the next character on Watercolor Wizardry
Oh,
that
that's
gets
right.
character
That's going to be
art.
this week. I'm excited. Oh, I need to send Maria my character stuff.
Also, on that same Tuesday is going to be Maria's game, Misguided Magic, where character death is probably going to eventually happen to one.
The way you guys are playing and not working together, one of you is going to.
And
If
then,
peanut
yeah,
butter
next
doesn't feel
week.
scoria after this week.
Next week for our chaos show, we're gonna have chaos commentary. We're gonna have our friends Ty and Aaron from Adventure Sling Productions on for an
Oh,
interview,
nice.
and we're gonna chat with them, and that's super exciting. So make sure you tune in next.
Turn in because it's
Turn
sleepy
in, turn out,
time.
whatever.
Where's
Ty
your
and Aaron are
head, y'all?
fantastic. They also did the New Varden game that they're still working on, so maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. They're super cool. We were on their podcast a few weeks ago. They're awesome. So
Yes. Come back and check that out. Check out all our games, and we'll see you next time.
bye.
Bye.